March is Women's History Month, and while the rest of the world remembers accomplishments from women like Elizabeth Blackwell, the first woman to receive a medical degree in the United States, Margaret Sanger, who opened the first birth control clinic, and Sally Ride, the first American woman in space, I, however, can only remember things that happen in the confines of a squared circle. For that reason, let's take a moment to look back on the accomplishments of female wrestlers in history. In particular, let's take a look back at Mildred Burke, the inaugural NWA World's Women's Champion, and the effect her career has on the wrestling world today in this edition of Spotlight. Before beginning her career in the ring, Mildred Burke took advantage of her muscular frame and would wrestle at the local circus, challenging men to try and pin her in a 10-minute period for a reward of $25. Many men would challenge her, but nobody would walk out with a $25 reward. Circus wrestling didn't bring in a lot of money, however, so in order to pay the bills, Burke would work as an office stenographer, but she never lost sight of her dream to become a professional wrestler. She would seek out local promoter, trainer, and Missouri State Wrestling champion Billy Wolf and ask for his tutelage. However, Wolf would initially deny her. He even went as far as to ask one of his male students to body slam her, hoping that would send her home. However, Burke immediately got up and body slammed him right back. Upon seeing this, Wolf would agree to train Burke and help start her path into professional wrestling. Billy Wolf would begin to see Burke as his golden student and would go on to become her promoter, manager, and eventually second husband. With his management, Mildred would go on to wrestle over more than 200 men in the 1930s, and she would only lose once. With this formula, Wolf made a lot of money. However, that wasn't all he was gaining. While he was on the road, he gained a reputation of being a womanizer, oftentimes fraternizing with the other female talent he managed and promoted. Burke would find this unacceptable and would file for divorce. Unfortunately for her, this wouldn't be the end of her hard times. Due to the divorce, the NWA professionally closed all channels of communications with Burke, essentially icing her out, even though she did nothing wrong. The NWA would attempt to bring the couple back together, seeing as Burke was seen as a locker room leader and had the loyalty of the fellow female wrestlers, and Wolf was seen as one of the guys amongst NWA. But in the end, the only agreed upon solution was that either Burke or Wolf would have to sell to one or the other. Burke would sell her company, Attractions Inc., to Wolf for $30,000, with the added conditions that all alimony was to be waived, and Wolf would be barred from doing anything with professional wrestling for 5 years. Wolf would only uphold that last condition for a few months. Before we go on, let's just do a quick recap of what's happened so far. Mildred Burke worked herself to the bone at 2 jobs, one that involved wrestling men and never losing. Mildred would have to practically force her way into the professional wrestling world. And then Billy Wolf would not only profit off her hard work and reward her with infidelity, but he also went on to take her company from her with the help from the wrestling promotion we still know to this day as the NWA. At this point, you're probably thinking that Mildred Burke has had enough problems for one lifetime, and Billy Wolf can fuck off. However, Billy wasn't done causing problems for Mildred, because under Wolf's leadership, Attractions Inc. would file for bankruptcy. Wolf would find himself the administrator of the company and declared that he was now the booker of Burke and the 27 women that were in her stable. Burke publicly denied this and pointed out that this matter was settled in court, and that Wolf wasn't even supposed to be involved in professional wrestling due to their 5-year ban agreement. In order to discuss this issue and the future of women wrestling, the NWA held a meeting on September 1953 in Chicago. Now, before I tell you the results of this meeting, I want you to take a few moments and ask yourself, how do you think the meeting went? Do you think Mildred Burke went in, provided the NWA with concrete proof of their deal, and was proven right, therefore leading to Wolf being excommunicated from the wrestling world? Do you think Wolf admitted his wrongdoings, apologized, and the NWA allowed women to prosper in the wrestling world? Do you think you're wrong? Whatever, if you thought it was any of the above, you're absolutely wrong. In the meeting to decide the future of women's wrestling, Women weren't even permitted to be in the room. All women, including Burke, were told to wait in the lobby, leaving Wolf unopposed in the room as he made his case against Burke. As a result, the NWA refused to recognize women's professional wrestling, and female wrestlers were banned from the annual NWA conferences. Women in the professional world had lost an incredible amount of value on that day. Continuing to earn his spot in Hell, Wolf would use his influence to tamper with Burke's career. At one point, stating she could only wrestle with one female wrestler and keeping her away from any other NWA members, and even bringing an end to her popular run in the Southeast. Emotionally and mentally tired from all of the tribulations she had faced, Burke met with Wolf one more time and agreed to a 2 out of 3 falls match against Wolf's legitimate daughter-in-law, June Byers. By the way, remember earlier when I mentioned Wolf was cheating on Burke while he was on the road? Yeah, Byers was the other girl. The match was for Burke's NWA World's Women's Championship title, and as expected, quickly became a shoot fight. Burke would later claim that she purposely lost the first fall of the match, planning to go all out in the second, but what she didn't plan for was Wolf continuing to play unfairly, as he had the support of the local commission and ensured the referee of the match was on his and Byers' side. After the second fall began and fighting each other for over an hour, Byers had targeted an old leg injury of Burke's, and this led to the match having to be stopped, as Burke legitimately couldn't continue. As a result, the second fall never had a finish. The match was called and the ending was in question. Burke left the ring with the title because she assumed that since she didn't lose 2 falls, she was still the champion. However, many in the media pushed the narrative that Byers had won, and due to this, Burke's title run was diminished. The NWA would recognize Byers as the winner and new World's Women's Champion. Coincidentally, Wolf's girlfriend Nell Stewart was the Women's US Champion. Now here's a part of the story where I have good news. We're done focusing on Billy Wolf. I wish I could have told you the story without mentioning Wolf as much as I did, let alone at all, but I needed you to understand how much turmoil he brought into Burke's life, because this is where we focus on all the good she accomplished despite his many poisonous actions. After the match against Byers, Burke returned to Los Angeles where she had opened her own promotion, the World Women's Wrestling Association, and despite the NWA rewarding the title to Byers, Burke refused to acknowledge this and reigned as the Women's World Champion. After defending the title for 3 years, Burke would vacate the title and retire from professional wrestling. Burke would dedicate her time to expanding women's professional wrestling worldwide. She would start International Women's Wrestling Inc. with Bill Newman and have offices in New York City, San Francisco, and Sydney, Australia. These offices doubled as booking offices and training centers for aspiring female wrestlers. Thanks to her hard work, Mildred was able to bring women's professional wrestling to many different countries all over the world, including Canada, Cuba, Mexico, Japan, Hong Kong, Macau, the Philippines, and almost every state of the United States. All Japan Women's Pro Wrestling would buy the legal rights of the WWWA World Championship from her and make it their top prize. In addition, they would also create the WWWA World Tag Team Championship in 1971 and the All-Pacific Championship in 1977. On February 14, 1989, at 73 years old, Mildred Burke would suffer a stroke and die peacefully in hospital 4 days later. In 2002, she would posthumously be inducted into the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame. In 2016, she was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame under the Legacy Wing. Mildred Burke's life was never easy. Oftentimes, she found adversity where she should have found safety, but she never allowed that to slow her down. There are more accomplishments that I haven't mentioned, and I will gladly mention them in the comments below this video. And if you yourself have anything to add about her legacy, then please do the same. However, I wanted to tell her story and her time with Billy Wolf in order to remind the young women of the world, especially professional wrestlers, that there are many people, men and women alike, who will attempt to hold you down, many times just because you're a woman. Take inspiration from Mildred's story and know that you can overcome them. To be a woman means to be strong and unbreakable, something that Mildred Burke never forgot as she made the world a better place for her fellow female professional wrestlers. And to the men who watch this video, we are born with undeserved privilege simply because we're men. We didn't work for this privilege, we're just given it. And as such, it's our responsibility to use that privilege to even the playing ground. Take a moment to look back at Mildred's life, and whatever you do, at the very least, avoid being Billy Wolf.